And last but certainly not least, joining us is Lauren Michelle, who is a singer, a songwriter, a former member of one of my favorite girl groups, Fifth Harmony. And she began experimenting with different sounds and is still tearing stuff up in so many different ways. And so I encourage all of you, if you're not already ready, to follow them all, to support them, download their music, and to buy the wares of those that are designing fashion. And so join me in welcoming all of them, no matter where you are. Please give them a loud round of applause.
Yeah, well, my name is Jauregui, Lauren Michelle. I like that you kind of introduced me as Michelle. I'm kind of like, I'm in the same space of fluidity currently at the moment. But I go by she, her pronouns. I'm pretty open to whatever, though I honor and respect the fact that we're all are just energy. And yeah, and what was the other question? I'm in Miami right now. I don't know if that's...
Perfect. Yes, that's what I want to know.
I identify, like, I keep kind of going back and forth between this because originally identified as bisexual and then kind of swerved into like pansexuality when I learned that there's kind of like a whole nother universe out there that I'm attracted to just souls, you know? So now I just think queer is it. Like, I'm queer. Like,
understood.
That's it.
As the umbrella, which I appreciate.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate you naming both the B in the acronym and the P in the acronym, because sometimes they get erased, right? And we spend too much time talking mostly about what it means to be gay or lesbian. We don't spend as much time, but we spend time when we talk about murder with our trans sisters, but we don't talk at all or often enough about what it means for people to be bi or pansexual or just be attracted to people, which is what most people are, right?
It's that fluidity, is that queerness. I think that's where I identify, is just like I fall in love with souls. I'm attracted to souls, and yeah.
I love it. I love it. We are all souls. We are all energy.
Well, first I want to clarify that I don't identify as Afro-Latinx. I know that I'm white. I just want to make that clear. Yeah. So yeah, but as far as like representation goes, yeah, I definitely feel like more people grew up seeing people who look like me. So I will acknowledge that privilege. And I did see people who were like me, but then at the same time, when it comes to like my queerness and kind of that fluidity, and I think even more so my like openness to have these conversations publicly and to like hold myself accountable and be like a real person. Like, I feel like that's something that I never really saw in celebrity culture or in artist culture, except for like my old like inspirations as far as like artists go, you know what I mean? Like there's of course I've been inspired by a lot of different people who just are themselves, and I think that's where kind of like I drew inspiration from. So I hope to inspire more people to just be themselves, like through and through, you know? Yeah, I feel like as far as representation goes, currently, when we think of Latinx, especially from an American standpoint, what's been marketed to us as Latinx culture, it's very white, point blank, period. And there's a lot of nuance to being Latinx. First of all, it's not just a monolith of a culture. There are multiple cultures throughout South America, throughout Central America, throughout the Caribbean, that express themselves in very different ways and very nuanced ways. And I feel like that conversation misses the mark a lot, because a lot of people think Latino music or Latinx music is just like reggaeton, you know? I've definitely experienced that from the music industry side, of people thinking that Latinx identity is a monolith and or a trend that can be exploited. Definitely experienced that. So yeah, I think that that's kind of something that misses the mark a lot in this industry and in the creative industries, is that we highlight white voices. We still live from a very white privileged, white supremacist perspective all around. And it's like what's marketable and what's considered like, you know, spicy or whatever, you know, spicy white, you know, like we consume that with kind of like a disregard for the fact that all white Latinx humans are inspired by the tradition of indigenous communities and African communities and their influence on our cultures. So yeah, I think more Afro-Latinx people need to be highlighted and uplifted, and in more commercial spaces. I think that's like where we start.
Yep. And not the spicy white stereotype. I got that. I like that.
You feel me?
Yep. I like that. Yep.
Okay, so just so I'm clear on the question.
Two questions.
Kind of,
one is, if you want to,
yeah.
if you have any personal experience or maybe even anecdotal experience that you want to share, because I imagine that there are some people who are like, I heard about this, I saw what happened to George, but I don't know what the big deal is, right? And it might be the same thing, which is like, what does this all mean to you? You're super busy. Like, y'all are bosses. Why was it important for you to be here to have this conversation tonight?
Well, I think across the board, I feel like Black trans lives are the most Black trans women's lives are probably some of the most persecuted, if not the most persecuted, like population that exists on the planet right now. And they exist across culture, you know what I mean? And I think that that's something that, you know, I think we focus on kind of America, and I think right now we're talking kind of more like in the Latinx world as well, which is kind of just like a blanket statement for everywhere, you know, south of America. So it's kind of like having these conversations and centering these voices is the most important piece of our liberation, because when the most persecuted of us is free and their needs are met, and we listen to their stories, and we choose empathy when we absorb their stories and listen to, you know, their experiences, to heal that and to get to a point where they're free would mean all of our freedom, because none of us are free until all of us are free. And so when you think of uplifting these voices, uplifting the artists in these spaces, uplifting, you know, and that's the thing, is that intersectionality is going to be the only way that we actually move towards a space of progress. You know what I mean? There's no way that we're going to get there if we don't include the nuance of our existence and protect the nuance of our existence as humanity. You know what I mean? And I think, you know, the narrative is centered in the United States right now because there's, you know, obvious uprising. But that uprising has been happening globally. Trans women have been being murdered for years upon years upon years. This is nothing new. This is probably one of the first times in history where we're actually listening to their voices and centering their voices and making it and doing things like this and having these kinds of conversations publicly in public forums, because it's, you know, while it's a very scary time, being that, you know, this man is in charge of the quote unquote free world, and of course influences ripple effect when you have an army everywhere. So, you know, there's like, this has been happening. Police brutality has been happening because police are state-sanctioned violence, you know, against Black bodies has been happening, against Indigenous people has been happening, against queer people has been happening, you know, until very recently it was illegal to be queer, you know what I mean? Like, we think recent is last week because we have this like instantaneous mindset at this point with all the freaking technology and apps that we have. But, you know, when you think back 50 years, 80 years ago, people still didn't even have the right to vote. We still have voter suppression happening right now. You know what I mean? And so when we talk about this freedom that we all want to see and that we all really want to embody, being where we're from, wherever we're from, you know, I think everyone's goal is to live a free life. And when we say free, we're asking for basics. We're asking to not murder people because of how they identify, and I think it's like the hatred stems from lack of understanding and lack of knowledge and lack of education. It stems from ignorance. And I think that Trump and this man in the White House is a symptom of the deep-rooted ignorance that is a result of colonialism across the board globally. Because you have people who invaded Indigenous lands, stole Indigenous people and displaced them and enslaved them, right? And a whole functioning thing of genocide on top of that, and you pretty much wipe out anyone who dissents, right, and who doesn't agree with what's happening, the machine of colonialism. So you erase history, you erase existence. So now it's like, oh wow, this is crazy. You know, people are coming out as like all kinds of, you know, the gender binary. You know, these are indigenous practices. These are indigenous beliefs.
Yeah.
They've been around. Two-Spirit has been around. You know what I mean? Like we co-opt these things to be woke, you know, but we have, like, that's the main thing I think, is when we talk about protecting Black trans women's lives, that is the root of the depth of, like, if we don't heal that, if we don't see their humanity, if we don't empathize with their humanity, we will never reach a point of freedom. Because
that's it. That's the clip. We can get this whole conversation now. That's it. You just shut it down.
I mean, there's so much. It's so much like nuance, and I feel like it's always been like points. We all talk about these points as separate issues and isolated issues, and that's why I say intersectionality is where we're gonna find our freedom. When we understand that the empathy that we need to embody for each other is the first and foremost part of healing this dissonant white supremacist diaspora that we all live in, you know?
And that the empathy and the love is important. Look, that was beautiful. Por favor, di un poco de español.
Sí, ¿quieres que lo diga en español? Ok, bueno. Se lo voy a decir en español, te voy a dar lo que dije. Ok, bueno. Mejor dicho, nuestras hermanas negras, trans, ellos son los más persecuted. No sé cómo decir eso.
Persecución?
Somebody help me out. Persecuted? Anybody? Anybody? Going once, going twice. ¿Atacadas? No?
Sí.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry, estoy nerviosa. Esto me pasa cuando estoy nerviosa, cuando hay presión, pero aquí vamos. Ok, so, básicamente estamos viviendo en la diáspora del colonismo, ¿ok? Y estamos en un nivel en donde para curar lo que ha pasado y el estado en que estamos desde ahora, en lo que estamos viendo, en lo que está este movimiento que estamos viendo, esto no es nuevo. Como que todos estos pensamientos y estas conversaciones de LGBTQ y entendiendo la existencia de trans, de individuales que son trans, es algo que ha existido desde cuándo, porque es una práctica indígena, o no práctica indígena, pero un belief. Coño. Se me va la palabra, pero tú me entiendes, ¿ok?
Pensamiento.
Pensamiento, ahí. Ok, un pensamiento indígena. Así que entender esas culturas o entender que todos estamos viviendo en las heridas del colonismo y que la empatía que tenemos que tener para nuestras hermanas trans es donde empieza a curar, es donde empezamos a curar el problema de la intolerancia, de no tener, I'm sorry, oh my God, no me estoy explicando bien. Okay.
No, es perfecto, es perfecto.
Es donde empezamos, creencia, gracias Loren, pero es donde empezamos a curar, es el entender que ellos son en su humanidad, validar su humanidad, proteger a ellas, proteger a lo que no entendemos o intentar entender en vez de juzgar. Es importante tener... es importante entender eso para que podamos avanzar el pensamiento, la creencia de nosotros para evolucionar, to evolve past white supremacy. That's how I'm going to finish that. Oh my God. I'm sorry, I have not talked my politics in Spanish, clearly.
Spanglish is perfect. Spanglish is perfect. We talk about intersectionality, we gonna make it work.
No, disculpa.
Muy bien. And we're giving each other grace. And I want to affirm a comment that came up while you were talking, and that it was beautiful, it was poignant, and it was clear, and everybody received it with the grace that you delivered it.
Yeah, well, I think I just kind of, same as Tatiana, was kind of acknowledging that as a non-Black Latinx person, we all have to really, as a community, I feel like we really need to just acknowledge the racism that is just very alive and well within our own community, you know? It is deeply embedded into the social consciousness. I just, like, without even thinking about it, it's just, and again, I think I kind of focus constantly on historical context because I feel like that's the most important link that we need to remember in all of this. Like, all of these symptoms are not arbitrary. Like the erasure of Afro-Latinx people is on purpose. The erasure of Black people in general is genocide. It's active genocide that is still ongoing. And it's across the globe, because across the globe, indigenous cultures have been decimated and just tortured and just completely trivialized, you know what I mean? And just taken and just given a bunch of limitations. And so I think it's just so important for us to acknowledge that when we fight, when we talk about being a part of this fight, you should never just want to get involved with justice for your own self-interest. You know what I mean? You shouldn't have to wait until your rights are also taken away to care about the fact that someone else is sharing space with you, coexisting with you in the same realm, and doesn't experience the same freedom you do. And it's not up for debate. It's an actual lived experience that we just need to listen to and uplift and acknowledge. And I think, yeah, like Urias was talking about, like, just they made the space. Like, we need to make the space. We need to acknowledge, uplift, and center these voices so that we can heal.
Yeah, I love the conversation literally between you and Urias in this moment, and your quotes and the acknowledgement of the ability to overcome the erasure by recognizing the truth for what it is, right? Like, we aren't making this shit up or saying that, like, we just got here. We're telling everybody that we need to acknowledge the history that has allowed for all of us to get here in this place and time. And
exactly.
No, go, please.
Sorry, and also I just wanted to
sorry.
like highlight as the part of the quote of, like, Latinx cultures across the board are built off of the backbone of African and indigenous cultures. Like Latinx culture is not, it's represented by a lot of white presenting, you know, folks, but, or excuse me, white folks, but it's not, yeah, sorry. it is, but that doesn't mean that that's where it comes from. You know what I mean? Or that is like the extent of the representation or the depth of where it comes from, you know? So I think, again, uplifting those voices and centering them in these conversations is the most important part.
No, super important. I appreciate that. And please don't ever apologize, especially for interrupting someone with male privilege. All here for it.
Well, I mean, I feel like one of the most important things to do is listen. Like, listen to the voices, listen to the stories, take the time to research if you don't understand, before you attack and before you belittle and before you choose judgment and nastiness. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, like, this is being human. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't change how you treat somebody based off of how they present. Like, that is reflective of your own character, not the person presenting themselves to you, you know? And I think that there's kind of this misconception that people have that we all gotta, you know, be the same. And we're so used to individualization and being individuals that we don't understand empathy and what that means. And so I think working on your empathy, working on your self-love is also important, like working on how you view your own self, because 90% of the time, if you are projecting nastiness onto somebody and making somebody feel excluded or like they don't belong or like they're othered, it's because you feel that way or you've felt that way at some point. So really work on yourselves and work on going out and researching topics and getting to understand stories and perspectives before you have an opinion. Opinions are not just things that you can have. Opinions must be informed. So there's a documentary on Netflix called Disclosure.
Yes, please.
Yes, I think that that's a great I think, starting point for anyone who wants to understand kind of the trans experience a little bit better from trans people's perspective, not, white Hollywood's perspective. I think also my friend Alec Weidmanon, I'm not positive how to pronounce his last name, but goes by Alec. They go by Alec. They go by Alec. Beyond the Gender Binary. Their book is incredible. Their book is so good. And that's another way to I think understanding trans stories is reading trans stories. You know what I mean? I think that's the most important part. And then the BTFA Collective, Black Trans Femmes, in the arts. Their collective is really incredible to contribute to as well.
They have a dope Instagram account. They have a powerful emergency fund. They are doing incredible work. I reached out to them today because I got a phone call from a mother whose daughter, a Black trans woman, was arrested at the airport because she was being harassed by ignorant police who were demanding of her to use a name that is inconsistent with her identity and how she shows up in the world.